time. This was his first visit to India. He was there to also see if he can establish his insurance business there.
Yes, because I think he's a very smart man. He knows that as the middle class grows in India, one of the big things they try to obtain, sometimes as a class status symbol, is a car. I mean, a car is becoming a very important vehicle of transport, plus infrastructure and the road systems in India are improving. So you know that as soon as that middle class becomes rich enough to afford a car, they're going to want to buy one, and insurance is the very next thing that will be the market that picks up.
Not only the car insurance, because, you work hard, you collect some money, then you want insurance that in case it all goes away, For instance, such a thing happened in the tsunami and others. So they want to protect themselves. So there's insurance. There's a big business in India.
Well, insurance probably wasn't always such a big business in India because Indians were used to stockpiling their money away, and when they bought hard assets, they bought hard assets. And insurance, I think, as a concept, didn't really filter down below the mega rich in India. But now, because of the growing middle class, I think it is starting to permeate down to those layers. And as you have dual income earning families, I think this is a natural thing for those families to want to have next. Okay, now we have the car, now we have the house. How do I protect it all? Insurance.
And he really enjoyed himself. And he's never been treated this well.
He was also well received by Indians. I think people liked the fact that he was sort of down home, folksy. His advice was just sort of not very technical. I mean, he's a very simple man with simple ideas, but he's brilliant. And he connected very well with Indian people. Well, outsourcing is one of our favorite topics here on Darshan. Naturally, we talk a lot about it. But this was an article I read that talks about how life is inside India's call centers. We watch the show Outsourced, and we kind of laugh because of the culture that's depicted there. And in reality, they borrow from what's happening overseas for the show. But in this article, the author points out that life is actually pretty hard inside of an Indian call center. It's not like a call center here where you can get up and take a bathroom break, but in India, the way the culture exists there, you have workers that are working longer and longer shifts at later and later hours. The environment, in fact, is so competitive in these call centers within India that it creates a perverse incentive structure in which not only vacation and sick days are penalized, but even things like trips to the bathroom, which can be timed to see how long it took you to actually go to the bathroom and come back. And, because of India's infrastructure issues, lateness, tardiness is an issue. So basically, the culture and the environment in these call centers can be very, very tough and demanding for the workers that work there. Add to this, you have practices like accent neutralization training. Because these are folks that spend their time on the phone having to listen to many different accents across many parts of the world. They have to train their ear to learn and understand these accents. And not only that, but to adopt some kind of neutral accent that isn't very Indian so that these people who are making these calls don't detect where these call centers are. So imagine adding that, which is a layer of cosmetics on top of the work that you perform every single day.
It's a mental thing.
It's a mental thing. So before we start envying these jobs that are moving overseas, let's just realize what it must be like to get up every day, put on a persona for 10, 12, 14 hours a day, a fake voice, a fake accent, and then do your job without bathroom breaks, sometimes lunch breaks, can't get sick or take vacation. This is a hard life being lived by these people in other countries.
You remind me of the old time I read a story about AT&T operators. That's exactly what they were going through. But I guess they haven't heard of union.
Well, I think it's coming, right? We are going to start to see these workers in these centers as they get better and smarter and more educated. They're going to realize the power that they have by collectively joining in.
I think we should let the communication workers union let them know that, hey, there's a tremendous need over there,
Well, I'm sure not all call centers are like this, but if many of them have these kinds of practices, then you can imagine that it's a hard life. And we shouldn't necessarily always envy it.
Hard work never killed anybody. Moving on, folks. This is an interesting theory. You have rich people living in New York City or in California or some other places. That they are taxed at a much higher rate. Now, 1% of these rich people living in New York City or Los Angeles, other places, they pay 40% of the total state taxes collected. They said these rich people are not to be depended on in a recession. You can't depend on them because in recession, their salaries go down like all the way up to 16%, 17%. Their riches evaporate. So what happens? Then you have to depend on the regular people. You know, they need to pay their taxes. For instance, the recession time, the regular payrolls only went down by 4%. But this volatile demographics that are called rich people, you cannot depend on them. They went down really bad. So many states had trouble. Now the idea is, look, folks, let's have the flat tax. Don't have that millionaire's tax. Even D.C. started talking about a millionaire's tax. I'm glad they didn't get on it. No, you don't want to tax everybody different rates. You want to do a flat tax. This will be a great experiment, you know, on a local level, so the federal government can also adopt flat tax. I really think it's a good idea, isn't it?
But it's letting your richest few who have the ability to absorb the recession get away from absorbing the recession, in which, unfortunately, in some cases, the richest of the rich were these executives and CEOs, the ones that made the fat salaries. So why not tax them at a higher rate? Because they help to contribute to the condition we're in.
Top 1% of the United States earners pay 38% of the federal income collected. Can you imagine that? So really, you don't want to depend on these people.
Yeah, but there's one more thing. You know, that top 1% makes much more than the 38% that they're paying back in. So I think no matter what, the scales don't even out, even if you call it a flat tax.
There used to be a measurement that the CEO should not make more than 35 times of the lowest paid employee in the company. But today, it's like 2,500 times of the lowest paid employee. You know, I mean, it's kind of, you're right, they're making way too much money. But I don't know, in a capitalist society, you can't hold them back.
Well, it is interesting to compare our capital society with what's happening in Japan. I read a story where they were talking about how in Japan it has become almost customary, if not a practice, for the CEOs to disappear during times of crisis. In fact, it happened even with the nuclear station we're talking about now that's in trouble. This is owned by TEPCO, which is Tokyo Electric Power. Their CEO pulled the disappearing act during a large portion of this tragedy that's unfolding in Japan. Of course, he's back now, and he didn't receive a lot of good press about it. In fact, Japanese, who are normally very stoic, are quite angry with him for disappearing during times of crisis. But if you look back, this is actually a practice that's
occurred before. He said he was sick, but he said he was sick.
He was sick, really. His whole country is sick right now. He can put his sickness behind the sickness of his country, for one. Right. That's one criticism. This also happened with Toyota. When Toyota was having all of its recalls, their executive disappeared.
That's right.
And so the author made a point to note that their CEOs don't get paid the way that U.S. CEOs do.
That's very true.
They're paid far, far, far less. So for them, a lot of them, when situations like this happen, it's a personal tragedy. It's a loss of honor. And they will do, you know, extreme things like suicide sometimes when these things occur, which is very, very sad.
A lot of them have done it.